Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm CJ Vogel, joined by Gerry Hamilton for this week's edition of Texas versus the SEC, brought to you by MyBookie. Get in the game with On Texas and MyBookie. We're going to talk a lot about Texas and Arkansas, the picture at hand for the SEC championship race, but also the college football playoff predictor and what's going on there as well. But before we dive into all of this, Gerry, a quick word about our friends over at MyBookie.
Yeah, this episode of On Texas Football, as always, is brought to you by MyBookie. Make sure you're in the game with MyBookie. Play any matchup, hundreds of college player props, and more. With the continued excitement of this season, again, make sure you're in the game with MyBookie. Bet any matchup, hundreds of college player props, and take advantage of weekly risk-free bets. The best part is you can do it all, anytime, anywhere, straight from your phone. Visit mybookie.ag and use promo code ONTEXAS to get started. It's MyBookie's 10th year anniversary, and they're rolling out the red carpet for bettors. Bet big and bet confident with risk-free Thursdays. If your boosted bet doesn't hit, you'll get your money back. Weekly, no sweat, win-win bets all season long. And sign up now using my On Texas all caps to cash in on double deposit bonus. It's a no-brainer. Double the cash in your account before you even place your first bet. But do not wait on it because it's only available for a limited time. For those who've been playing with MyBookie, they've got something for you too, a brand new loyalty rewards program and MyBookie Plus all caps. It's simple. The more you play, the more you earn, and as you progress through the tiers, unlock exclusive promotions, epic giveaways, and cash back in your bank account. Thank you very much, MyBookie. Again, mybookie.ag.
Perfect. Thank you, Gerry, and thank you again, MyBookie, for sponsoring Texas versus the SEC. And Texas gets to play another SEC game this weekend, a big one, right? You know, it is a rivalry game. I'll give it that. Yes. You know, maybe an older rivalry, but it's back now with Texas and Arkansas set to play each year that the teams are in the SEC conference. Texas making the trip back up to Fayetteville, first time since 2021. We don't have to talk about that all too much, Gerry, but I did want to talk about a couple of things, right? Arkansas does have probably the most potent offense Texas will play. Certainly the biggest threat of a quarterback with Taylor Green. I like Andrew Armstrong in that offense as well. Give me your thoughts and kind of from a 100-foot view of this game, but also where Arkansas can kind of pose a threat to the Longhorns.
Yeah, I think, look, the whole key for Arkansas against Texas is not turning the ball over. CJ, we talked about it earlier in the week. The Arkansas quarterbacks have 14 fumbles this year. I'm not saying fumbles lost, but fumbles. They also have thrown 7 interceptions. That's a lot of footballs in harm's way at quarterback position. They've also had a few other fumbles. So they have 2.5 fumbles per game, not lost, but that's how many times they're averaging putting the ball on the turf. They did it 3 times against LSU and ended up losing 34-10 when that game was 16-10 at one point. So the first thing for Arkansas is they have to play clean football at home. If they can't play clean football with a week off now in this rivalry game, they aren't going to play clean football all season probably. That is their key. That is Arkansas's key. If they can play clean football and they can win on first down against the Texas defense, then suddenly Bobby Petrino is going to be an advantage as a play caller. If they can't win on first down, then that offensive line, I think, susceptible to pass rush. I think Texas can create a lot of havoc in this game. So winning on first down is going to be the key for Arkansas, which means first down defense is also key for Texas. Yeah. Because if you can get Taylor Green and the offense behind the chains, they have shown a propensity for turning the ball over.
I kind of like how this Texas schedule, kind of shook out. Obviously, Texas has a favorable schedule this year. I'm not going to dive too much into that. Not yet, at least. We will get to that later in this episode. But Taylor Green's a good precursor and appetite for what you'll see with Marcel Reed, right? Before Taylor Green, I think with that Arkansas offense and the way that they like to run, I think that Vanderbilt game was very key for the game plan, knowing that you had to win on first down, knowing that you had to keep life difficult on second and third downs, keep them behind the chains. It's going to be a similar game plan, at least similar philosophy in my eyes in this game as well. But also you get to see more and more on tape. And for Texas offensively, finding some rhythm offensively against Florida this past week, and scored 49. Quinn Ewers and his group puts up 42 in about 33 minutes of game film. They were rolling, probably the best that we had seen this offense in its entirety all season long. And then you look back at what Arkansas secondary has done over the last 2 games, Gerry, and unless they completely revamped that secondary, over that bye week, I have to imagine it's going to be much of the same with Jalen Braxton sidelined, and obviously this Texas, confidence flowing again. Talk about the mojo getting back. Secondary back in store for a big game offensively for the Texas offense in the passing game.
Yeah, I think so. Look, it's going to be interesting though. Where Ole Miss attacked Texas is not Texas' strength in the passing game. And maybe it's a Quinn versus Dart thing. Guys have their different strengths, right? Ole Miss smoked Arkansas, especially in the 3 high. Vertical routes outside the numbers to the sideline, right? Number to the boundary. Dart throws that ball really well. Quinn, that's not the best ball he throws, right? Quinn's more of an in-between in numbers deep ball guy. So that's going to be interesting. And Ole Miss really attacked down the field with their tight end. I mean, he had 9 catches for 99 yards, but I bet 89 of those yards came over the middle of the field and behind the linebacker. So, again, that's not where Gunnar Helm and Quinn Ewers have hooked up in the passing game the majority of the time this year. So what Ole Miss did against Arkansas is different than what Texas has done most successfully this year. But to the point, here's the whole key for me. I think their secondary has played at such a porous level that if you can just pass protect, if you can hold Landon Jackson up and you can pass protect, I'm not sure the Arkansas linebackers or the secondary can hold up against the Texas scheme and the speed. So that's what I look at. I think if you can maintain and keep Landon Jackson from having a big game against you, then Texas is gonna win in the passing game. It may just look different than the way Ole Miss won in Arkansas a couple of weeks ago. And I love the point you made, CJ, about the QBs, Taylor Green in this game. Look, Oklahoma's terrible in offense, but at least Michael Hawkins gave you that look, right? You've seen it. You've reacted to it with your vision as at the edge position, at the linebacker position, at the safety position. Then Diego's even a little different than that, right? So he's more of a playmaker, just keeping the thing alive, looking to throw the football, which is more what Taylor Green's going to do, not QB run called stuff. But what's going to be interesting, CJ? How much QB called run game stuff does Arkansas run with Taylor Green? He's coming off 2 different knee bang-up injuries this year. And are they going to keep putting him in harm's way? If there's a game they're going to do it, it's this one, because it's like almost win or go home for the Arkansas fan base this year. So I'd hate to tell you, Taylor Green, but make sure the knee pads are below the thighs this game, because they're going to run him. They need to win the football game. So it's going to be really interesting. But I do think I agree with you, CJ, and the Taylor Green game this week, that helps in College Station as well.
Yeah, 100%. Again, going back to Taylor Green, 89 rush attempts on the season. 44 of them have been quarterback powers or draws off of the edges. So you see where they like to go with them. Another 30% of those runs have been true quarterback scrambles. So not so much used up the middle, but more so get east to west and use that speed, use that size to fall forward against, some lighter box competition out there as well.
And by the way, that's why he's been injured this year, because he's 6'6" and built like a basketball player. His legs are always exposed. It's not like he's Cam Newton and those big guys that are 6'6", 240 running around. He's built like a basketball player. His legs are always exposed, and he's taken some rough hits this year.
Yeah, absolutely. The key to me, Jerry, in this game is Texas has to get up early. And it doesn't matter how quickly. Just take away the Arkansas ability to rely on the run. And you can do so by obviously the big game passing-wise. But also, if you get Arkansas into situations where they have to throw the football, listen, you can get pressure on the quarterback this year, right? For Arkansas. Keyshawn Blackstock has allowed 29 pressures. He's going to be your right tackle this upcoming weekend for Arkansas. And Amarion Harris has spent time at both guard positions right now, pegged in as your left guard for the Razorbacks. Both of them have allowed north of 20 pressures on the season. Both of them have allowed more than 5 sacks this year. That's a lot. No Texas offensive lineman has allowed more than 12 pressures. So that kind of puts into perspective the amount of time one quarterback could have versus the other. And that's, again, going to play into the turnovers that you mentioned with Taylor Green earlier in the episode. But, Jerry, I wanted to get to your score prediction because I got a conversation that might stem from this afterward. What are you rocking with real quick?
I'm going 36-23 or 37-23. So I think they're going to be right there on the verge of covering the number.
I like it. That of course, maybe some Texas fans, depending on when you got that number, won't like that, Jerry. But I have 42-17. And I say that because I think this is a a game in which you almost have to take a BCS level approach to it as the head coach. Right now there's been a lot of talk, a lot of speculation, or even some criticism about Texas and its ranking in the college football playoff, right? They're number 3 right now. They've yet to have a ranked win, despite playing 4 ranked teams at the time. None of them still have a lot going for their season at the moment. But if you're able to add a 30-point road victory, a 25-point road victory over Arkansas to a 30-point victory over Oklahoma, a 30-point victory over Florida, a 20-point road victory over Michigan, that helps your resume. And in a sense in which, hey, you might need to come down to a resume to get into the college football playoff, this is a game in which I think you run it up, much like we saw in the aughts when the BCS era was running rampant and you saw teams keeping their starters in up 60. I think that's a game like this where Texas would try to do that.
Well, I agree with you, CJ. And one, I think this game's personal for Sark. So if he has a chance to punch one in, he will. But let's just say there was 2 spots left, and it came down to Ole Miss and Texas. And they're both 10-2. Ole Miss won at Arkansas they scored 63, and Jackson Dart set passing records. Then they beat Georgia and Oxford right after that.
Yep.
To the point, if it gets down to, which we're going to get into later, if it gets down to, there's 5 10-2 teams for 4 spots, when they start looking at this stuff, it might very well matter.
I totally agree. At the end of the day, however, the only thing that does matter for this game specifically, and we were talking about, if everything goes well, the luxury of it, the nitty-gritty of it is Texas needs to return to Austin with the win to keep alive those SEC championship game hopes. And looking at it right now, there are 3 one-loss teams in the conference going into this weekend. There are 5 teams with 2 losses. Now, Tennessee, a 5-1 team, plays Georgia, a 5-2 team. So one of those teams will either bump back to the rest of the pack with the 2 losses, or you'll see Georgia completely bumped out of the SEC title picture, with Tennessee obviously continuing to maintain its destiny as a 1-loss team. But ultimately, Jerry, not much movement otherwise, right? Missouri plays South Carolina. Maybe you see them get off the bus, if you will, in terms of going to Atlanta. But right now, it feels like everything is kind of shaken out to being Texas and Texas A&M. Winner of that game, you're going to Atlanta to play for an SEC championship game.
Yeah, let's clear one thing up. Let's get one out of the way. Missouri's not beating South Carolina in Columbia. So that one's done. Missouri's going to officially be out, okay? I think LSU will win at Florida. I don't understand the line. Florida secondary couldn't cover us, so they're too banged up. So Nussmeier and LSU are going to have a big day. LSU will win that game unless they're disinterested. And DJ Lagway, again, makes that miraculous recovery. But, again, this Tennessee-Georgia game is huge, huge, because Tennessee still has a road game against Vandy. And if Georgia – it's huge for the SEC race and the playoff race. Actually, if Georgia loses, they're out. They're out of all of it.
They're done.
They go from number 1 to out of all of it with 2 weeks to go. I mean, that would be saying something. If Tennessee loses, then their margin for error is gone in the SEC and playoff race. So that means they got to go to – they have UTEP, then they got to go to Vandy. And Vandy, this isn't last year's Vandy. That's a much cheaper game. Tennessee and Texas A&M control their own destiny, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to right now. If Tennessee wins out, they're going to be in the SEC championship game because either A&M or Texas is going to lose.
That's right.
And that's where we're at with the whole SEC race right now, because I am removing Missouri. I'm sorry, Coach Drinkwitz. Still go play the game, but you're not winning.
Yeah, I'm with you in the Missouri-South Carolina game, especially with the way that South Carolina has been playing lately. It's actually funny looking back that block in the back against LSU might be the play that keeps them out of a playoff picture, right? Because they've been playing really good ball recently, and they got some marquee.
I mean, they lost last couple of minutes against Bama too.
Yeah,
I mean, South Carolina is on track to be the 9-3 team that they're like, dang, dude, we were like 2 plays away from being in the college football playoff.
That's exactly it. So, to your point, Missouri looking unlikely that they'll maintain in this pack when we film this episode next week. And, of course, moving forward, let's do the hypothetical real quick. Should Tennessee fall to Georgia in Athens? They are a 10-point underdog. Not only are you going to have only 2 teams remaining at 1 loss in the conference, but I want to go real quick down the list of teams in contention for the playoff who are sitting in the SEC with 2 losses. For this exercise, of course, we're going to throw Missouri out the window, but you're going to have Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas A&M. That's a lot. That is a lot in the picture. It's a logjam at the top. And we're seeing it right now with the committee. They only got 4 spots. How do you see this shaking out moving forward?
Oh man, this is tough because if you bring up like the ESPN playoff predictor to look at, the 2 teams that are the lowest, or if we have the percentages predictor, I don't know if we have that one, but if we just look at the playoff predictor from percentages, the 2 teams that ESPN has the lowest right now are the 2 teams that I think are in. Okay, well, the lowest in the 60s. Okay, so they have Texas at 82, Alabama at 76. So I was wrong. Tennessee 74, Georgia 73, Ole Miss 61, A&M 14. I think Alabama and Ole Miss are going to get in the college football playoff. I mean, Alabama's got Mercer. Then their remaining schedules: Mercer at Oklahoma and Auburn at home. I think Alabama's going 10-2.
No.
Ole Miss off this week at Florida, which is not going to defend them, and then Mississippi State, which has no chance to. I mean, Jackson Dart's going to end up throwing for monster yards the last half of the season. Ole Miss is going to go 10-2 and be on a hot streak. They're going to be on a streaker going into the playoffs, right? I mean, so they're in. I think those 2 teams are in. I think Alabama, if Georgia beats Tennessee, is the favorite to get to the SEC championship game to play the winner of A&M Texas. I think that's pretty simple if Georgia beats Tennessee, right? I think that's where we head with that, if I understand all the tiebreakers correctly. So I like Alabama. I like Ole Miss to get in. Obviously, the Georgia-Tennessee game is massive in the playoffs.
I was going to ask you, they got a 73% by their name right now. Are you buying that they have a 73% chance? They're going to get by UMass. That's the game after Tennessee. But Georgia Tech, I know that talent-wise, there's still a level in which you have to respect Georgia in that game. But I mean, Georgia Tech just came off of a big victory on the road against Miami to give them their first loss of the season as well.
Georgia Tech absolutely believes they can win the game. I mean, and that's half the battle, right? And, you know, the problem Georgia Tech will have in that game is if the whole thing is Georgia wins and they're in the playoff, then that's tougher. If I'm Georgia Tech, I want Tennessee to beat Georgia. Then maybe I can hand them their 4th loss when nothing matters, right? I think if something matters, I think Georgia being at home, that crowd will get behind them. I mean, that is going to be a raucous atmosphere for that game if a win essentially gets Georgia into the playoff. That makes it much tougher on Georgia Tech. I think Tennessee, if they lose the Georgia game, you know, you sit there. Let's say Texas beats Arkansas and beats Kentucky, right? So they're going to A&M. If Tennessee loses to Georgia, beats UTEP as they will, then Tennessee goes to play at Vanderbilt and Texas goes to play at A&M. And you know what? Both those teams, you know, you got to win to ensure you're in the playoff. I mean, that's where it's at. I mean, Tennessee definitely would have to win in that scenario. And maybe Texas still gets in at 10-2 if they lose to A&M. But the problem with that is if Georgia's in, if Georgia beats Tennessee, if Georgia's in, if Ole Miss is in and Alabama's in, then the Texas A&M winner, if both of them are 10-2,
I agree.
Texas, I don't think Texas may get left out.
I completely agree, which goes back to the score prediction, the point I was making earlier. Again, this is in the hypothetical that Georgia beats Tennessee to give them 2 losses, and then Texas either falls to Arkansas this upcoming weekend or they fall to Texas A&M later on in College Station. Those are the 2 likely wins. Texas isn't losing to Kentucky. The point being, Texas would end the regular season with 2 losses. That would put them in a bunch of 6 teams right now with 2 losses. And again, I think you have 4 spots. If Notre Dame falls, maybe you have a 5th.
That's what we wanted to mention. If USC if USC upsets Notre Dame before half their team goes in the portal, Notre Dame's the key. SEC fans need to cheer for Notre Dame to get upset. Army ain't going to do it. What about Virginia or at USC? SEC fans need Notre Dame to lose because then you have a chance to get 5 teams in, because I think the Big Ten will only get 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only conference that has a chance for 5 is the SEC.
And with that said, the point for Texas this weekend and moving forward is kind of have to treat this like a BCS game. Because if you have the one loss to Georgia and you add another loss, well, you don't necessarily have a marquee win on the schedule per se, but you would have a 30-point win over Oklahoma, a 30-point win over Florida, maybe a big win over Arkansas, because you got a 20-point road victory over Michigan when that team still had hope and they were still fighting the way that they expected to be coming into the season. So my point being is run it up, add the pretty points, add the style points, because at the end of the day, when you evaluate resumes, margin of victory is going to be one that Texas will have an advantage over every other team in the conference at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole – here's the other thing, CJ, is how are they going to weigh late versus early? Because Ole Miss is going to be the one that's on a heater going into the playoff at 10-2. Well, something really crazy. If they lose at Florida, I mean, that would be a rise up. If DJ Lagway plays some amazing game, I still don't see it. And then Mississippi State's not beating Ole Miss. And I don't care if it's the Egg Bowl or not. Those eggs are cracked in Starkville. So, like, what is the scenarios? There's two scenarios that could hurt Texas. If you have 5, 10-2 teams for 4 spots, there's two scenarios. One, A&M's 10-2 and beat you, and you're 10-2. The other is if you get weighted against Ole Miss because they blew out Arkansas and beat Georgia. Those are the two scenarios that should be scariest for Texas fans. If there's 5, 10-2 teams for 4 spots.
Well, we'll get one step closer.
And Georgia beat Texas. Forgot that one.
Texas fans would like to forget that one as well, Jerry. But we're about 48 hours away from getting one step closer to all of this, whether that be a Texas victory, a Tennessee loss, a Tennessee win, who knows? But we'll have a clearer picture in about 48 hours. Of course, for MyBookie, sponsoring this weekend's edition of Texas versus the SEC, Jerry, a quick word before we get out of here on MyBookie.
Yeah, go visit mybookie.ag and use the promo code ONTexas to get started. It's MyBookie's 10th year, and they're rolling out the red carpet for bettors. Bet big and bet confident with risk-free Thursdays. If your boosted bet doesn't hit, you'll get your money back. Weekly no sweat, win-win bets all season long. And sign up now using my ONTexas, all caps, to cash in on double deposit bonus. It's a no-brainer. Double the cash in your account before you even place your first bet. But do not wait because it's only available for a limited time.
Perfect. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you again to MyBookie for sponsoring Texas versus the SEC this weekend. We're getting close. We're finally getting really close. Middle of November, that's when, as Sarkisian says, these are all the games to remember. So we'll get updated one more week, 48 hours from now. Of course, for Texas, the only thing that matters, style points or not, is a win in Fayetteville against Arkansas. We will keep you updated here at On Texas Football for how Texas shakes out against the SEC and the playoff picture moving forward. But for Gerry Hamilton, I'm CJ Vogel, and this has been On Texas Football. Welcome.